So today I'm going to talk mostly about Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks and Compulsory Heterosexuality and Lesbian Existence by Adrienne Rich. I felt like there were a lot of connections between these two texts, and like the authors were kind of on the same page on a lot of topics, because in a way they both, I felt like, are talking about the ways that feminism has come up short, but they also really see its potential, that their ideal or best feminism would be more expansive. So in Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks, I kind of expected, so in the introduction, she talks a lot about how people have false perceptions of feminism, and she says that she wishes that she had a little book in her hand. She says, I want to have in my hand a little book so that I can say, read this book and it will tell you what feminism is, what the movement is about. I want to be holding in my hand a concise, fairly easy to read and understand book. Not a long book, not a book that's thick with hard to understand jargon and academic language, but a straightforward, clear book, easy to read without being simplistic. So I kind of thought that's what Feminism is for Everybody was going to be. I thought it was going to be written with the audience intention to be people who don't know about feminism, and that it would, be like Feminism 101. Instead, I thought it was more it was concise and the chapters were short and it was easy to read, but instead I felt like it was more written to other feminists about what changes need to be made in the feminist movement, or what we need to do going forward in order to actually make feminism be for everyone. It was kind of her vision for how feminism could be for everyone, but also a lot of being really critical of moments in history when feminism hasn't been for everyone. And same with Adrienne Rich, she also talks about like moments in history and in general criticizes feminism for not being for everyone by not addressing like heterosexuality and assuming heterosexuality is the norm and not questioning compulsory heterosexuality or thinking about it in terms of how it could be part of the patriarchy. And Bell Hooks kind of does the same thing with different issues, where she points out issues that people or feminists, including feminists, haven't really viewed as patriarchal issues, but that she says are. And they both talk about this by talking about domination a lot. So, like Bell Hooks talks about how both women and men can be violent, and how that comes out on kids a lot, and how that is part of the patriarchy as much as wife battering is, because of how it's about dominance. So she says, patriarchal violence in the home is based on the belief that it is acceptable for a more powerful individual to control others through various forms of coercive force, on page 61. And she says, cultures of domination attack self-esteem, replacing it with the notion that we derive our sense of being from dominion over another. Many men feel that their lives are being threatened if these privileges are taken away, as they have structured no meaningful core identity. And I think Adrienne Rich would agree with that. She says in the last sentence of her article, the power men everywhere wield over women, power which has become a model for every other form of exploitation and illegitimate control. So she really sees, like Bell Hooks, sees any kind of dominance, not just men over women, but sees any kind of dominance as part of the patriarchy. And she also talks about another feminist theorist, Nancy Chodorow, I think might be how you say it, I'm not sure, who talks about how men are emotionally second in women's lives, but for boys, their relationship with women is like the exclusive and primary relationship, on page 636. And that kind of reminded me back to when Bell Hooks said, many men feel their lives are being threatened if these privileges are taken away, as they have structured no meaningful core identity. So I feel like that relates, as in, the men, they don't have a real core identity. Their identity is in their dominant relationship over the woman. And then I think for Adrienne Rich, she would say also woman's identity is caught up in being desired by a man, and that's what compulsory heterosexuality is. It's that you need to be heterosexual and submit to men, and that's heterosexuality is part of how men control women. And then Bell Hooks also touches on that when she talks about sexuality. She says, to some extent, radical feminist thinkers were right years ago when they suggested that women would only be truly sexually liberated when we arrived at a place where we could see ourselves as having sexual value and agency, irrespective or whether or not we were the objects of male desire. So I would think that idea there, that women need to separate themselves from male desire, would be a really good launching point to talk about compulsory heterosexuality. And while Bell Hooks does address lesbianism and feminism and heterosexuality, I don't think she addresses compulsory heterosexuality and how that's, as Adrienne Rich says, a political institution like any other political institution. I don't think she addresses that as much as Adrienne Rich would want her to. And I like that both of them, they're not just critical as feminism as in they think that feminism is bad. Their view isn't like, oh, feminism is bad because it's excluded these certain topics or these people. It's feminism would be so much better if we included these topics, which is kind of like a more positive and interesting way to think about it. So like Adrienne Rich will say, yeah, this piece of work was really good, but what would have made it even better is if they would have addressed compulsory heterosexuality, which I think is true too. And going back to feminism is for everybody being like a little primer on what is feminism. Bell Hooks says feminism is a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression. And she says it's really about sexism. She talks about just sexism a lot, how it can be perpetuated by men and women. And so then that kind of leads to the question, well, what is sexism? And I think I really liked Adrienne Rich referenced another author. She says, named Kathleen Gow, who has 8 characteristics of male power, and they are men's ability to deny women sexuality or to force it upon them, to command or exploit their labor to control their produce, to control or rob them of their children, to confine them physically and prevent their movement, to use them as objects in male transactions, to cramp their creativeness, or to withhold from them large areas of the society's knowledge and cultural attainments. So I really liked these categories, and then she goes on to list like specific examples of actions that fall under these 8 different categories that are all examples of male power and dominance, so all examples of sexism. And I just think that thread running through both of the pieces really is like about power relations and dominance, and not just, it's not about just men being dominant over women, but it's just about dominance in general. And so it's such a gross misinterpretation of feminism to say that feminists want women to be dominant over men instead of men dominant over women, because really what they're both advocating for is a world almost free of dominance, where people don't get their worth and value, don't feel like they need to dominate other people, and where people don't have to go through being dominated. This video is getting really long, so I think I'm going to stop now. Hopefully this was good, and hopefully my next one will be better.